Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this episode is a big one in that the central story of it is in regards to. So it's the episodes. So previous episodes have established there was a large mission. There was a mission part of the town that was founded by Spanish missionaries and a whole bunch of other things that sank to the bottom of the Pacific. But the story essentially the story is supposed to explain how that actually happened. It's supposed to set up the real story behind why the missionary town sank to the bottom of the ocean, because the central thing in this episode is that there's a play being put on called The Donkey That Saved Crystal Cove. The episode is kind of centered around that. That's essentially what the important thing is. But the episode kind of implies that there's more to the story. That kind of outright states that there's more to the story that the common people of Crystal Cove don't actually know. And that's what comes to light in this episode. It explains what's going on. But in case the episode opens up with Blaine LaFranc opening up the fact that he's going to be the director for the play on The Donkey That Saved Crystal Cove. He establishes that first and foremost, he points out that a lot of the people that are there are serving community service and are being forced to help, more or less because not necessarily because they want to, but because they have to fulfill a community service requirement. But he explains how the story. He then proceeds to set up exactly what happened about how Friar Gabriel Serra and his pet donkey Porto, who helped save Crystal Cove, that they saw a collapse regarding on the fault line, and it sank into the ocean. And this seemingly alludes to the fact that in real life, and it's heavily implied that especially in this episode, but it's heavily implied that Crystal Cove is set on the Pacific Ocean, and they outright said it, and they explain that it might be in fact be somewhere in California, but in real life, California, there's a massive fault line just running through the state of California. And a lot of people are very worried that one day we could have a massive earthquake over there and most of California will fall into the ocean. That is a very real world worry for a lot of Californian people, because they live on a fault line, and the way fault lines work, there's a very good chance that the whole thing could just fall in, which is very, very scary. But the episode and the story of Crystal Cove seems to take inspiration from that. About how there was an old missionary town that was built in Crystal Cove, which is implied to be in California somewhere, and it's implied, and the episode states that there was a massive earthquake that just caused the entirety of the state, that just caused half of Crystal Cove to just fall into the ocean. And it's because of that and it's only because of Portal that all of these people were able to get away safely for the most part. But the story. But in case he then proceeds to explain how the role of Friar Serra is actually going to be put on by Dougal McGinnis, who was from the previous episode with Grim Judgment, and he shows up again. And he's wearing his Friar Serra outfit, and he's openly very happy about the fact that he gets to put on a production and be Friar Serra. But then he asks the director what exactly is going on and why there's a dead guy. And the director, whose name I've already forgotten, but the director, he goes on to explain how they brought a bunch of historical artifacts over to actually give the play authenticity. And one of those was the body of the real Friar Serra, the actual real mummy of the guy from the story. And of course, it's at this point where he starts getting everybody into positions for rehearsal, when suddenly the lights go out, which of course causes everybody to become a little bit panicked. But of course everybody's wondering, and of course Dougal wonders what the hell's going on, and immediately jumps into the director's arms. But then the glass case winds up opening up, and the mummy of Friar Sarah comes to life and starts chasing people around, and also grabs Dougal and throws him into the set, which causes it to break up and collapse a little bit. Which, of course, if somebody got chucked at it, it would absolutely break. They're only like made of plywood and stuff, not for particularly heavy weight, but enough that they can have some sort of structural integrity while people are actually walking around on them. I've done theater, I know how those work, so yeah, they're sturdy enough that somebody can easily walk around on them, but getting somebody thrown at them, yeah, that's not gonna cut it. But in case the mummy also then proceeds to attack the director, who only escapes because he tries to gnaw on the guy's head and his hairpiece comes away, and the director proceeds to flee. At which point the mummy, now satisfied that everybody's leave, then tells them not to tell his story, or they're all doomed. And of course, and also meanwhile, what we find out is that as an offer from the previous episode, Daphne has in fact successfully moved Fred into her house without her parents knowing, because in her own explanation, he can't just keep living in the woods anymore. Fred needs actual, he needs to actually take showers and stuff. And even though Fred admits that he has what he calls hobo soap, which, based on how he describes it, is not going to cut it. But it does also imply that he picked that up from when he was, a hobo. He figured out how to make his own soap, although not good soap, not soap that will keep you clean, just, soap. But in case she brings him in, she closes all the windows and blinds and all the other things to make sure that nobody would see him, and also she makes him take the servants' entrance so that he can get in and out without her parents knowing. But she does explain that now he actually has his own place, and also Scooby and Shaggy are there as well, because Nova is also being moved into the spare bedroom with Fred, and Scooby wanted to see her off, and also promises that they'll try to see her every day. But in case Daphne then proceeds to give a tour of the bedroom, she tells Fred where he can go take a shower, do his business, and where he can sleep, and more or less just tells everybody that to make the room his own. But it's at this point where Shaggy actually gets a text from Vincent Van Ghoul, who just types the word heap. Which of course nobody fully understands what it is, but then Mystery Incorporated then proceed to gather at the Plague production, and what we find out is that he actually tried to write help, and it's revealed that he's actually been put in charge of the production. As it turns out, because as a direct result of the fact that the mummy of Friar Sarah attacked the place, and Vincent Van Ghoul doesn't know this, but he points out that since Dougal McGinnis and the director disappeared, he's kind of been put in charge of both putting on the play, and of course is quick to point out that after looking around, it's a complete and utter disaster site. He has no idea how they actually managed to trash the site, but he does quickly point out that it's not ideal. He points out that it needs a lot of work before it's going to be production ready, and that's why he exclaimed that he just typed help. But but of course it's at this point where George Avocados tells him that he absolutely is going to need all the help he can get. And he then proceeds to walk onto the stage, and of course everybody is confused as to why he's there, and also calls him Avocados, which causes Avocados to become upset, because that's the recurring bit. But they also ask him the gang also asks him what he's doing there, and he then proceeds to reveal that it shouldn't be much of a surprise to them, because obviously, if you've watched the narrative that's been going on with this guy, first and foremost, he failed out of politics because his father was a diamond thief, and he got blackballed out of politics, so he couldn't run for mayor anymore. And also on top of that, the Mystery Incorporated blew up his farm, so now he isn't able to do his family business stuff anymore. Which means, currently, he's a janitor. And of course he's constantly getting yelled at by his boss to continuously get back to work, because obviously he's frequently stopping to just talk to everybody, but and throughout the episode, that's just a recurring thing. But he also proceeds to point out that this also puts him in the ideal position, because he also points out that when they inevitably fail, he'll be there to clean up their mess, and then proceeds to cackle madly before his boss tells him to get back to work, and he leaves. And of course, this is this point where Vincent Van Ghoul points out that that they're going to have a lot of work, and also points out that obviously they're going to be that also apparently the single copy of the script that they had was destroyed in the attack, so they don't even have a script anymore. At which point, Shaggy and Scooby actually volunteer the group to actually go and help. And, of course, the rest of the group are confused and protest a little bit, but, of course, Shaggy then proceeds to point out that, obviously, they've done a lot of scary stuff throughout this series, and also just in general, because in the actual story, in the actual continuity itself, Shaggy and Scooby have been dragged into every mystery. They haven't really been volunteering for a lot of things, so, it's kind of time to pay the piper. Shaggy just asked them for a favor, and they kind of have to do it because he's done a lot of things for them, and it's kind of time. But at which point the rest of the gang proceeds to shrug and points out that Shaggy is kind of right, and they immediately get to work fixing the set and starting to work on things. And also while everybody's working on the set, Velma actually winds up piecing together what little of the script they do have, and discovers that they're actually learning about the story of the donkey that saved Crystal Cove, which she points out is probably a good place to start. And of course, it is in fact a very interesting idea for play production, and of course, it's at this point where Shaggy points out that obviously, if Dougal McGinnis was putting on the identity of Fire Sarah, then he also wonders who exactly it is that's going to actually put on the play and actually play Fire Sarah now that McGinnis has run off. And it's at this point where Vincent Van Ghoul actually tells him to stop what he's doing, walks up to him, and then notes that his facial features make him the perfect Fire Sarah. And also, since Scooby is a dog and therefore would be perfect as an animal, he's also cast as the donkey Porto, which of course both of them are very happy about. And of course the rest of the gang then proceed to volunteer their ideas. With Fred pointing out that with his knowledge of traps, he could easily rebuild the set as well as he could. While Daphne, with her knowledge of fashion and a whole bunch of other things, could easily make costumes for everybody. And also, Velma points out that since she's kind of a nerdy bookworm, she could easily go off and go find out more about the story of Porto and rewrite the script from there. Which of course, Vincent Van Ghoul is very appreciative of all of them, and also points out that's a little bit cliche. And at which point he decides that he points out that they're going to need to get to work post haste. At which point Velma excuses herself to go look through the historical artifacts that they sent over. To try and learn a bit more about Porto, while the rest of the gang kind of continue working on the set and their acting. And she does proceed to go downstairs, and what we find out is that the artifacts are actually from the Burlington Library. They've apparently been brought over from the Burlington Library, and it makes sense considering that Oz Burlington was actually putting together archives of all the things that have happened to Crystal Cove. Of course, he would have information about Porto. And all the other things, and of course she starts poking around, starting to look into things, trying to figure out what exactly it is that was going on with the idea of Oswald, with the idea of Porto. She's starting to look into things when suddenly, she's actually attacked by the mummy, who suddenly appears when she notices that the case is empty. And it then proceeds to attack her and tries to grab her at one point, and even tries to chase her up the stairs. But she easily kicks him down and knocks him off her, and then she proceeds to run up the rest of the stairs and immediately into the main theater, where as it turns out, Vincent Van Ghoul decided that the best way to actually train up all of them to actually learn more about play production is to just show him one of his own works that he's made. And it does work because obviously he is a B-list horror movie actor in this incarnation. It makes perfect sense that he would have a bit of knowledge that he could pass on. But in any case, it's at this point where Velma runs in, and Shaggy and Scooby tell her to move, and while the rest of the group notice that she seems to have seen a ghost, and she does point out that she's to try a mummy, which of course causes Shaggy and Scooby to immediately grab each other and cling to each other, and they of course have no idea what exactly is going on, and of course it's at this point where Vincent Van Ghoul actually becomes outraged when pointing out that he heard that the production was actually haunted by a mummy, but he didn't think it was true, and then immediately goes to Mayor Nettle's office to complain. Because obviously she withheld the fact that the production was haunted by a mummy, and she merely points out that she didn't even believe it was a real thing herself. She just thought that the director and Dougal got out of the thing because we're just trying to get out of the thing. She thought that they made up the mummy to just get away with just dipping out of the production and not worrying about it. So yeah, she does apologize to Vincent Van Ghoul, but does point out that she also thought that they were just upset about the fact that they weren't getting paid enough when and Vincent Van Ghoul apparently is offended by the fact that he wasn't getting paid. So he gets ready to storm out of the mayor's office. But she tells him that that he needs to stay because they've already sold out on the play, and that one of the best critics in Crystal Cove, Vanished Helgenju, is actually coming. And as soon as Van Ghoul hears that name, he immediately starts panicking / cowering. And what we find out is apparently Van Ghoul and Helgenju in this continuity have a bit of a history. As it turns out, Helgenju as it turns out, they're rivals, and Helgenju wind up going into critiquing and critics and writing journalism and a whole bunch of whatever it's called, journalism. Yes, that's what we're going with. Yeah, she goes with it. But in case, he points out that the reason he went into the journalism is because Vincent Van Ghoul and Helgenju have been rival actors for the longest time, and eventually Helgenju just got sick of losing all of his roles to Van Ghoul. So he then proceeded to go on to start being a critic, and just ruin Van Ghoul's career that way. Which and of course points out that if there's a problem, that the mummy is obviously going to cause problems, and that on top of that, Helgenju is going to have it out for him. So either way, the production is doomed. But it's at this point where Fred reassures him that they'll catch it, telling him that Mystery Incorporated is on the case, and Daphne does point out that if there is indeed a mummy loose, and that they'll find it and figure out what it is and try to catch it. But in case, it's at this point where they actually do indeed do exactly that, and they then proceed to go off to go work on the production. And it's at this point where they actually go downstairs to start looking into into the mummy attack, and they start looking around all of the things and all of the crates that are down in the basement, and note that there seems to be some sort of organic residue just all over the thing. That's all over the boxes, and they do note that that's a little bit gross. But then they start going through the they start going through the production trunk and find Dougal McGinnis's old costume, and Fred tells Daphne that they could use that to make a costume for Shaggy. At which point they see a hand, and Daphne immediately grabs it and knocks whoever it is out, which Velma notes is anticlimactic. And then they find out that it's just Dougal McGinnis, which Fred thinks he's the mummy, which of course Dougal denies that he is, pointing out that obviously he was going to play the mummy, play Firestar in the actual play itself, but before then proceeding to point out that he was only trying to get his costume back because he's no longer going to work on the production. Then asks what all of them are doing down there, and they reveal that they're actually there to get the costume so they can use it to play Shaggy, because obviously they're still putting on the production without him. They need a costume. And of course, this is this point where Dougal McGinnis actually becomes outright offended at the fact that Shaggy could fill his shoes. Pointing out that since obviously, and this is revealed a little bit later, Shaggy is not an actor. He's not that kind of person. But and of course, Dougal is offended that they somehow managed to replace the best person in Crystal Cove for this. And offended that they replaced him as an actor. He then leaves in a huff, which of course they note is very strange and weird. But in case they then proceed to go back upstairs, where Shaggy is trying to rehearse his lines, and we quickly find out that he is just not good at them. Because obviously he says like a lot, so he isn't really good at the whole reading lines thing, which of course winds up coming up in a lot. But and of course, Scooby has no idea how to be a donkey, so he obviously just goes, "I'm a donkey," and that's pretty much the only thing that Scooby's able to figure out how to do. But throughout the entire rehearsal, George Avocados is just sitting in the audience when he should be working, mind you, and he's just heckling the production and heckling their performance. And of course, his boss at one point tells him to shut up and get back to work. At which point the rest of the gang come upstairs and are about to share what they found with Vincent Van Ghoul, when suddenly, out of the center of the stage, the mummy of Friar Sarah suddenly emerges and once again tells everybody that he starts attacking people as well, but he starts telling people that those who don't heed his warning will be doomed, and that they should not tell his story. And he repeatedly has told people not to tell his story. So for that reason, he starts attacking people and starts flying around the stage. And most of the gang winds up being gripped with fear because and even Velma admits she has no idea what's going on, which she admits is a first for her. But eventually, Fred winds up turning on the stage lights, and that winds up causing the mummy of Friar Sarah to disappear and dissipate. And this of course causes everybody to start freaking out a bit, because they obviously have no idea what's going on. But of course they start running through the suspects, because obviously they don't really know who could actually be behind the mummy. Obviously Van Ghoul submits Helgen Jew, because obviously Helgen Jew doesn't like Van Ghoul very much. And then also Dougal McGinnis, because he was sneaking around the basement weird, and also the director, because nobody's seen him for most of the episode. He just appeared in the opening thing and then just disappeared. But Velma ultimately decides that regardless of what's going on, they have to put the production of the play first, because that is going to be the key to solving the mystery. And of course they do proceed to go do that, and then it's revealed that the mummy of Friar Sarah is actually standing on the roof of the theater. And he then proceeds to just disappear. And it's at this point where the gang then proceeds to go into actually making the play the best that it can be. Fred and Daphne actually Fred has since finished the set, so he starts helping Daphne with costumes, which is very cute. But also at one point, to actually find a prop for Shaggy to hold, she actually goes to make a cane using one of the doorknobs from the Burlington Library, which is notably a diamond, which is interesting. And it's one of the crystal doorknobs that were all found throughout the entirety of throughout the entirety of Crystal Cove. It's one of those. But meanwhile, Vincent Van Ghoul is trying to teach Shaggy and Scooby how to be better actors. And one of the things that is just going to live rent-free in my head from this episode is the fact that Vincent Van Ghoul gets down on all fours and starts braying like a donkey. And which Scooby is trying to take after, but it's just gonna be one of those weird moments where it's just like, yeah, it makes sense in the episode, but it's also just really goddamn weird. But in case eventually they do wind up finishing the play production and it's opening night, and of course Vincent Van Ghoul peers out, and Helgen Jew has a front row seat to the entire thing, which of course makes Vincent Van Ghoul nervous, and he doesn't know if the play is actually going to go off without a hitch. But Shaggy and Scooby just reassure him that he's Vincent Van Ghoul and that he can do anything he puts his mind to. So they of course do immediately go to do that. And it's at this point where they start pulling on the play production, and I should note this here, but Vincent Van Ghoul's opening monologue is very reminiscent to the spoken parts from Thriller, which is supposed to be intentional. Apparently, That is apparently Vincent Van Ghoul's voice actor. I forget his name, but he apparently did the voice work for that, and that's supposed to be a direct reference, or actually, I think it's the person he's based on more accurately. But he's supposed to be based on. But in any case, whether it's his voice actor or the person he's based on, the point is there's a deep-seated reference there where somebody responsible for the creation of Vincent Van Ghoul in this one is directly responsible for the spoken monologue and thriller. And that's what he's actually parodying here. He shows up covered in seaweed and starts telling and starts giving the opening monologue, which is very reminiscent of Thriller. That's the whole point. But in case he gets up, he tells everybody the story, and also one person in the audience heckles him, pointing out that they're on the Pacific, because admittedly in the actual rhyme itself it doesn't rhyme because the Atlantic rhymes better with what Van Ghoul was trying to go with, but because it's actually the Pacific, somebody hackles him and he immediately just goes in and he immediately just kind of breaks character for a minute and then continues to deliver his monologue, and it's at this point where they actually go into the part where Scooby and Shaggy are supposed to do their thing, and they are of course just very bad at it, and of course they then proceed to actually. It's this point where it becomes apparent that they just don't know what they're doing. At which point the mummy of Sarah once again reappears and once again tells them to stop telling the story or they're all doomed. And the mummy then proceeds to chase Scooby and Shaggy around the audience. And of course it's at this point where throughout Helgen Jew has no idea what's really going on. It's very clear that he's been trying to find literally anything to cut holes in the play. But here he just starts scribbling rather frantically because he's just kind of taking it all in. And of course, Scooby and Shaggy, Shaggy specifically, but he starts running through the audience, starts throwing through the mummy to try and get it off his trail, which isn't working. And eventually the mummy does eventually catch up to him and throws him onto the stage, which and he winds up being caught by several members of Mystery Incorporated. At which point the mummy tries to attack him again, but Shaggy throws a churro in his mouth, which causes it to become stunned because it's having trouble trying to get the churro out of its mouth. But at which point it's revealed that Fred had actually built a cage into the actual production. And they wind up catching the mummy of Sarah up live in front of an audience, and everybody cheers. At which point they decide to unmask the mummy of Sarah, and it's revealed to actually be George Avocados. And of course Fred is very happy about the fact that they finally unmasked the guy and it was actually George Avocados. And of course they wonder, and of course George Avocados points out that yes, he has been after several misdirects. They wonder why now he would suddenly be the villain. But of course Velma points out that it's not really much of a surprise because he's obviously a very evil dude, so it's not really a surprise. So of course Avocados points out that he doesn't really need to he probably doesn't need to summarize, but he will anyway. At which point he then proceeds to explain that after losing in politics and getting his farm blown up, he then decided to go into several other smaller jobs, but notably has struggled in a couple of them. One of which was a fortune teller and then obviously a janitor, but and interestingly, the fortune teller thing didn't really work out for him. So he eventually resorted to a life of crime, where he decided to follow in his father's footsteps, and decided to go on to try and steal things to actually make ends meet. And eventually, he finds out that the diamond his father stole was apparently never recovered, and it's implied here that Fred Sr. actually lied about the fact that the diamond was recovered, because obviously it was never recovered in that episode. He apparently lied to save face, but in case it's revealed that it was actually one of the artifacts that was brought over to the Burlington Library, and then you dress up as the mummy of Sarah to both scare people away, so that he can look into the boxes, while at the same time trying to figure out where exactly it was that the diamond was stolen, that the stolen diamond was, and of course it's then revealed that the diamond is actually on Shaggy's cane that he's been carrying, and of course further inspection, Daphne then takes a closer look and with a thing and discovers that it is in fact the diamond, and And of course, he does point out that he would have gotten away with it if it hadn't been for Vincent Van Ghoul. Which, of course, Vincent Van Ghoul has no idea what he's done, so he's just a little confused. But it's at this point where Shaggy points out that if he is indeed the mummy of Friar Sarah, then how was he actually able to appear at the rehearsals? And it's at this point where George Avacados reveals that actually he wasn't responsible for the haunting at the rehearsals, and assumed it was one of the kids. So yeah, there's a bit of an inconsistency there, and it does make sense considering during the one scene where we see the mummy appear, both the mummy and Avocados are seen on the screen at the same time. So it obviously couldn't have been him there, but. In case with that, Avocados is then hauled off by the police, and at which point, Helgenju then walks onto the stage to give Van Ghoul a piece of his mind, and of course Van Ghoul starts cowering behind Fred because he thinks that this is going to be the end of him and the end of his career. But then Helgenju reveals that actually he's come up to actually compliment Van Ghoul on his play, pointing out that it was the most absurd thing he's ever seen, and he kind of liked it, and of course, this causes Van Ghoul to become very happy. He's very happy about the fact that Helgenju liked his thing. And then proceeds to shake his hand and points out that it actually came to me him as his inspiration, when in actuality it just kind of happened. But and as Helgenju and Van Ghoul actually kind of hit it off. The rest of the gang then proceeds to go downstairs into the basement. Where they actually start cleaning up and start putting a wrap on production, and Shaggy and Scooby are just happy to have finished the thing, because Shaggy admits it now means that they get to go celebrate at the Clam Cabin, which is their favorite restaurant, so of course. But he gives, as they're poking around, they note that the mummy of Friar Sarah is actually in its case again, which of course strikes them as a little bit odd, because one of the things Avocados admitted is he swapped himself out with the real mummy. Obviously, he disguised himself as the mummy the entire time, and it's just been and that's what we've been seeing for most of the episode, except for that one instance where it wasn't him. So the mummy just kind of appears in its case again, even though and of course Velma is curious as to what he's actually doing there, at which point the mummy actually comes to life, and it's revealed to actually be the real mummy of Friar Sarah. At which point the mummy then proceeds to reveal the actual story of what happened to Crystal Cove, and revealing that actually Porto didn't try to save the town, he tried to destroy it. And then proceeds to reveal that he was actually part of a mystery solving team. And this is implied by his picture in the Burlington Library, but it's revealed that he then reveals that he was actually a bit of a younger person back when he was still alive, and that he had a mystery solving team called the Fraternitas Mysterium, which is just Latin for the mystery fraternity. But in any case, the mystery fraternity, they arrived at the site that would one day be their missionary town, and they then proceed to discover Fernando de Aguirre, who then tells them a story about the curse that he found underneath Crystal Cove before the madness took him, and then he wandered off into the woods and nobody saw him again. So At which point they discover the pieces of the Planispheric Disk that he left behind, the two pieces that he had, and they do proceed to look into them, and also consider at one point trying to destroy them, but the evil that lurked underneath Crystal Cove tried to consume them and tried to keep them from destroying the piece of the Planispheric Disk. And at which point Porto, Wandom Donkey, he wound up getting controlled by the evil entity under Crystal Cove, and then proceed to set up several powder kegs underneath the old missionary town, and taking one of the pieces of the Planispheric Disk with him as it all went up. And of course, Friar Sarah did chase after him, but by that point it was too late. And one of the pieces sank to the bottom of the ocean, which is the one Professor Pericles found. Well, in an effort to keep the piece of the Planispheric Disk as far away from Crystal Cove as humanly possible, he stuck it in a wheel of cheese and sent it on its merry way, which is actually revealed to be what the Cabinet of Curiosities had. It's revealed to actually be the central key jewel of the Cabinet of Curiosities. And of course, at this point he then proceeds to tell a very ominous mission about how they need to be wary of Scooby-Doo, because he admits that it's always the animal that goes first. and tells them that if they are not careful, the dog and that they need to that he will actually bring ruin to Crystal Cove, and that they need to heed the warning of the alligators, which is and telling them that the dog must die. At which point he then proceeds to crumble into dust, and he's delivered his message. And there's an implication there that he's directly referencing from the Gatorsburg episode, where a sign briefly appears that says the dog dies, and Scooby starts panicking because obviously Firestar just told him that he needed to die. And so yeah, this episode opens up a lot of things. Not only does it imply that the animals in each group are in fact the ones that are going to cause ruin when the Bureau actually comes, but also it reveals what actually happened at Crystal Cove, and that everybody thinks that that portal tried to save the town, when in actuality he blew the whole thing up and sent half of it to the bottom of the ocean. Which is an important thing, but also finally George Avakos has been arrested for something, because he has been the suspect in a lot of these, but has not actually been arrested before now because it's never actually been him. So yeah, that's kind of rule of threes. Well done. But yeah, I did like this episode because it does kind of explain what happened to the history of Crystal Cove, and does reveal what actually happens to it. And also seems to imply that something with Scooby-Doo is about to go down, which I'm a little concerned about, because Scooby-Doo's kind of a lovable mascot. I don't think, if something bad happens to him by the end of the series, I'm going to be a little upset. But in any case, that's going to do it for my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. Top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!